There is a tree growing across America right now that most people consider a weed. State conservation departments publish guides on how to kill it. Farmers rip it out of their fields. Herbicide companies market chemicals specifically to destroy it. This same tree has a Janka hardness of 2,620 pounds force, the hardest wood native to North America, twice as hard as white oak. Nails bend against it, chainsaws spark on it. It burns hotter than any other eastern hardwood, 32.9 million BTU per cord. Its fence posts last over a century in the ground without a drop of treatment. A single bow made from its wood was once traded for a horse and a blanket, and before barbed wire existed, this tree was barbed wire. 60,000 miles of it, planted across the Great Plains to fence an entire continent. Then someone invented a cheaper version made of metal, and within a single generation, the most planted tree in America became the most hated. Here is Act 1. This tree has been waiting 13,000 years for an animal that will never come back. The Osage orange produces the largest fruit of any North American tree. It is a bumpy, softball-sized yellow-green mass that can weigh up to 2 pounds. It falls to the ground when ripe and rots where it lands. No modern animal eats the whole fruit and disperses the seeds. Squirrels tear them apart but barely move them. Deer chew them in place. In 1982, ecologists Daniel Jansen and Paul Martin published a landmark paper arguing, "This fruit is an evolutionary anachronism. It was designed for mastodons, giant ground sloths, and gomphotheres, which went extinct when humans arrived in the Western Hemisphere, roughly 13,000 years ago." Harvard's Connie Barlow called it an elephant fruit in a land without elephants. Without its dispersers, the tree was trapped. Before European contact, it occupied one of the smallest native ranges of any American tree. It was limited to the Red River drainage of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. A pocket so small, one archaeologist proposed it may have been confined to a single creek in Fannin County, Texas. But the people who lived within that range understood what the wood could do. Tribal wars were fought over this tree, not for its fruit, for the wood inside. The Osage people prized it above all others for making bows. French explorers translated their use into bois d'arc, meaning wood of the bow. The anglicized corruption bois d'arc still echoes across the South today. The wood bends without breaking and snaps back with lethal force. Bending strength above 20,000 pounds per square inch, 50% stronger than red oak. Among the Arikara of North Dakota, Scottish botanist John Bradbury documented in 1810 that a single Osage orange bow could be traded for a horse and a blanket. Bows made from this wood have been found over 2,000 miles from the source trees. Archaeologist Frank Shambach proposed that the Spiroan culture at Spiro, Oklahoma, controlled the Osage orange bow trade from 1250 to 1450 AD. A pre-Columbian resource monopoly built on a single species of tree. Meriwether Lewis sent cuttings to Thomas Jefferson in March 1804. He wrote that the indigenous peoples esteemed the wood so highly, they traveled many hundred miles in quest of it. Jefferson planted them at Monticello. Within 50 years, this obscure tree, from a tiny pocket of 3 states, would be planted across an entire continent. The entire westward expansion of the United States was stalled by a single problem. There was nothing to build a fence out of. The Great Plains were treeless. Split rail fencing cost $500 per mile, and there was no wood to split. Smooth wire rusted and snapped. The Homestead Act of 1862 granted 160 acres to settlers who would improve the land, but without fences, crops were trampled and property rights meant nothing. Jonathan Baldwin Turner, a Yale-educated professor at Illinois College, began experimenting with Osage orange hedges in the late 1830s. Locals called it Professor Turner's Folly. By 1847, he issued his first commercial circular. His description of the mature hedge was simple. Its dense iron branches soon become so interlocked that no domestic animal, not even a common bird, can pass through it. His verdict on the tree's fitness for this purpose was absolute. Horse-high, bull-strong, and pig-tight. Seeds were shipped from Texas at $50 per bushel. Seedlings were sold by the millions. The cost to plant a mile of living fence was roughly $120, compared to $500 for split rail. America's first barbed wire was not made of metal. It was alive. At its peak, America had more miles of Osage orange fence than it had miles of railroad. By 1869, an estimated 60,000 miles of Osage orange hedgerows lined the Midwest. Kansas alone would eventually reach 96,596 miles. Monroe County, Missouri, had 2,000 miles in a single county. A properly maintained hedge became stock-proof in 3 to 4 years. Thorns up to 1 inch long lined every branch. Trees planted 1 foot apart and pruned aggressively sent up interlocking shoots that formed a living wall nothing could cross. The technique was called plashing. Cut 3/4 of the way through a stem at the base. Bend the still living plant horizontally. Weave it among the upright branches. The result was a barrier that repaired itself, grew thicker every year, and required no nails, no wire, and no replacement parts. The hedges did more than fence. They broke the wind across open prairie. They stopped erosion. They sheltered wildlife. And they provided a bottomless supply of the hottest burning firewood in North America, 32.9 million BTU per cord, burns like coal, glows blue. John Warden, a farmer writing in 1858, put it plainly. It is no longer a matter of experiment. It is a proved fact. The man who killed the Osage orange hedge got the idea from the Osage orange hedge. DeKalb, Illinois, 1873. The town was surrounded by Osage, orange hedgerows. A local carpenter named Jacob Haish looked at the thorns and tried to use them directly for fencing. It proved impractical, so he conceived something else entirely. If the natural thorns worked but could not scale, he would make thorns out of wire. Joseph Glidden, a DeKalb farmer, saw a similar concept at a county fair. He went home, used a coffee grinder to twist wire into barbs, and wrapped them around double-strand wire. He filed United States Patent Number 157,124 on November 24, 1874. Promoter John Warren Gates described the product in 6 words: lighter than air, stronger than whiskey, cheaper than dust. The numbers that followed were annihilating. Glidden's factory produced 5 tons of barbed wire in 1874. By 1880, 40,000 tons. By 1901, 135,000 tons. The price collapsed from $20 per 100 pounds to under $2. A DeKalb correspondent wrote to the Illinois State Journal in 1875, "Enough material to fence 160 acres may be carried in a common buggy, and 2 men can put it up in 2 days." An Osage orange hedge took 4 years to grow and required annual maintenance by gangs of workers with scythes. Barbed wire went up in an afternoon. The hedge planting industry collapsed almost overnight. The tree didn't just lose its job. It lost its home, its people, and its name. Existing hedgerows met 3 fates. Some were ripped out to reclaim farmland. Others were chopped down for fence posts to hold the very barbed wire that replaced them. Still others were abandoned to grow wild into tangled, overgrown shelter belts that nobody maintained and nobody wanted. Simultaneously, in the tree's tiny native range, the original stands were being destroyed. The wood's extraordinary rot resistance made it valuable for railroad ties, bridge pilings, mine timber, and street paving blocks. Grit magazine reported that the Osage orange once came close to extinction because native populations were over-harvested for the railroad tie business. This coincided with the forced removal of the Osage people from their ancestral lands. The tree lost both the industry that planted it and the people who had valued it for 1,000 years. The paradox crystallized. Nearly extinct in the place it came from, classified as a weed everywhere it had been planted. It took 13,000 years for this tree to escape its tiny native range. It took one generation for America to wish it hadn't. The Missouri Department of Conservation officially lists Osage orange as a nuisance native plant and publishes detailed control guidelines. The University of Maryland Extension classifies it as invasive. Corteva Agriscience, formerly Dow Chemical, markets herbicides specifically for removing it from pasture land. The fruit became a punchline. Hedge apples sold at roadside stands with folk claims of repelling spiders. Iowa State University researchers tested the claim and found the whole fruit does nothing. Spiders spin webs directly on the trees themselves. A farmer in Putnam County, Illinois, watching someone plant an Osage orange, captured what a century of indifference had made everyone think. He asked, "What are you doing that for? Everybody around here hates them. We have spent so much time getting rid of those things. People once said God designed Osage orange especially for the purpose of fencing the prairies. Now everybody around here hates them. In barely 100 years. Forget what they call it. Look at what it does. Jonca hardness. 2,620 pounds force. The hardest, widely available native wood in North America. Twice as hard as white oak. Harder than hickory. Harder than black locust. Nails bend. Chainsaws spark. Pre-drilling is mandatory. Heat output. 32.9 million BTU per cord. The hottest burning eastern hardwood in existence. It does not flame like oak, it glows. Massive ember beds burning blue. Firewood enthusiasts call it the BTU King. Rot resistance, fence posts set in the 1800s still standing across Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. A barn in central Mississippi built on Osage orange footings in 1914 stood until a tornado destroyed the structure in 1990. The footings were still solid, 76 years in the ground, no treatment, no preservative, just the wood. A self-harvested Osage orange fence post costs nothing but labor and chainsaw gas. A pressure-treated pine post costs $8 to $20 and lasts 15 to 25 years, while leaching chemicals into the soil. One free Osage post outlasts 3 to 5 treated posts and asks for nothing in return. Traditional bowyers still call it the finest bow wood in North America. One wrote he had never seen a yew that could shoot as fast as Osage. The wood glows golden yellow when fresh cut, and it darkens to rich brown with age. It takes a high natural polish. The chemicals that make it indestructible, osagen and palmiferin, are now being studied for antioxidant properties and anti-cancer potential. Forest Relief of Missouri, one of the few organizations willing to say it out loud, calls it simply one of the toughest, strongest, fastest growing, and most drought-tolerant trees in North America. This is not the first time America threw away something it could not replace. Roman concrete heals its own cracks. It was replaced by Portland cement that crumbles in 50 years. American chestnut was better than oak, and it was erased by a fungus that rode in on nursery stock nobody thought to inspect. Osage orange fenced the Great Plains, armed a continent, and lasted centuries in the ground. It was replaced by wire that rusts in 20 years and posts that rot in 15. The tree did not fail. The economics changed. When the economics changed, the tree went from national infrastructure to nuisance weed, not because it stopped working, but because something cheaper showed up. A $15 treated post leaches chemicals into the soil for 15 years, and then needs replacing. An Osage post sits in the ground for a century and asks for nothing. The question is never whether the old material works. It always works. The question is whether anyone remembers. Somewhere in Kansas right now, an Osage orange fence post is holding up a line of barbed wire. It was set in the ground before the First World War. The wire has been replaced 4 times. The post has not. 13,000 years ago, this tree lost the only animals that could spread its seeds. It survived. Then it lost the only industry that valued its wood. It survived that too. They call it a weed now. The wood does not care.